Hey, Romeos.
Romeo,
Hey.
How are you?
looking good.
We're well on this wonderful Wednesday evening.
Yes,
How are you guys doing?
always well.
Always a pleasure to be in
Always-
Romeo World Headquarters.
Always well.
I'm aroused.
Are you?
There you go.
Then I will remove my glasses, and hopefully that will cause your level of arousal to diminish.
Wardrobe, more Kleenex for Nuran.
Or Pat, you should back up.
Is this better?
My radius is farther than you. So
Wardrobe, goggles.
Good to know. Good to know. So, Aki, what is the
Yes.
first order of business today?
First order of business is to say hello to our loyal viewers, our esteemed listeners and supporters. Please watch, please comment, please subscribe. And now I will pass it to Nuran.
bunch of brain dead motherfuckers. Just subscribe, you assholes. All of
There
you.
you go.
Okay.
And our trademark is alive and well.
Retired old man.
Our trademark or
Our
his
trademark.
trademark?
Retired, not retarded.
Are we disowning him?
Retarded old man, retired old man, expressing outrage, opinions.
Roll it off the
outrage.
tongue, Nuran.
So what are we talking about?
Yeah.
Well, we're no longer
great.
going to talk about whatever you were just talking about.
Ah,
But watching you in action raises a question we should perhaps address.
let me get this tissue off the table.
Dominic, you may want to distance yourself.
Yeah,
Right.
well,
Too late.
So,
So,
are we inherently good or bad? And I don't mean the Romeos. I mean human beings in general.
wow.
Wow, this is philosophical.
yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Wow, we're getting
Is there
deep.
one answer?
There's a deepness. There's a depth. There's a we're plunging into the depths of psyche of humanity, of the psyche of the. Of
Then there is
human
no
race.
one better to get the conversation started
Our
than
psyche
Dominic. Dominic.
Wow. Well, I think that we are born inherently good, but life experiences make us
I disagree.
bad.
Okay, you didn't finish saying what he was saying and you had already
Yeah.
disagreed.
I'm excited.
Yeah, I think life experiences, takes you away from the goodness.
So you think psycho?
People disappoint you. People that you trust screw you. Like that song.
So if what you're saying is true,
Yeah,
and that those experiences cause you to quote unquote turn bad,
yeah.
doesn't that mean that the bad was within you? It just needed to get triggered
Probably.
or aroused,
you're
to
right.
use a word that Nuran loves?
Yeah, you're right. No, you know what? I don't disagree with that. I think it's there,
Monsieur le modérateur.
but it gets triggered.
So that means it's there.
Probably, yeah, probably. I think we can all be good or bad, but
So I disagree with you with the fact that you said we're all born good.
Yeah.
I
All right,
disagree
go,
with that.
Go ahead.
But I don't want to take Aki's thunder.
No, please
You will
do.
never take Aki's thunder.
Please do.
Only one person can take away
My thunder,
Aki's
my
thunder.
thunder,
and that's Aki.
my thunder is the people's thunder. Please.
Okay. So yeah. So the reason I disagree with you or I believe psychopaths are born
Yeah.
that way. I
but
believe
we're always talking about
schizophrenics.
exceptions. Yeah.
So there are some brain. We got to first of all step back and marvel at the biological and chemical components of what makes us human and how unbelievably varied we are through billions of us on this planet, through thousands of generations that we've been alive. I don't know how many thousand, tens of thousands. I don't know how many generations humanity has been alive in our current form. But the huge disparity of types of human beings that are born, you can't say that someone is born good or bad as a de facto. I think the brain chemistry and the way that we come out is the way we were formed inside the womb, and is a function of the DNA that we've inherited from our parents,
go.
and a whole bunch of stuff that happens from a physical and chemical reaction biology perspective. So I think that there is a certain innate amount of human beings who are born with issues that we would consider to be abnormal. Psychopaths, for example, someone who doesn't think twice about taking a life, or feels no remorse. Sociopaths, of which maybe I'm one, but people who don't really.
Why are you not sure?
Of whether I'm a sociopath. I think I'm borderline. I think I'm a borderline in there because I have some empathy, but I don't have a lot of empathy. I'm not an empathetic person.
Okay, but
That's
that doesn't make you bad.
No, because I have a high morality and I have a high moral compass and
Well,
personal integrity.
there you go.
I don't like to lie. I'm. It's been difficult for me to be in a sales role and a business development role all my life, being the type of person who cannot lie and does not lie.
No,
That's actually been
so-
good for me.
Yeah. It's been
because-
good for you and for your customers. I don't see how that's
exactly. But I'm not the norm when it comes to certain, and maybe that's why it was good for me and my customers because it's just the way I am. So it's the way I'm built. That's not to say everyone is built that way.
Right. I think people are born bad are a minority. I think good.
I agree with that.
I think good is inherent. Bad is learned behavior.
Well, there's some inherent, but
So what-
Okay, I can't disagree with you. I
Okay,
agree.
so let's bring some definition to the terms.
Yeah.
What traits would you attribute to a good person, and what traits would you attribute to a bad person?
Empathy would be a good trait.
It is, but I don't have much.
I'm not that I'm singling you out, Naran.
No, you can. It's okay. I know myself.
Okay,
I'm,
but
I'm comfortable
let's
in my
not talk
skin.
about Naran specifically. Let's look in general terms.
Yeah, so
what
empathy.
are the traits that would cause you or anybody else, most other people, to say that person is good versus that person is bad?
I think it's easier to say what's bad because everything else is good.
But aren't they just the opposite side of the
because
coin of one another?
I don't agree if you're over empathetic that you're good. I don't think empathy is, I think,
Take that, Aki.
Saved by Dom once again.
I really
Thanks,
believe
bud.
that. Maybe because I don't have a lot of it, I do admit that. But I don't think empathy is, to me, having pity for somebody, which is basically that, having empathy.
It's more than that.
Yeah,
It's not just
pretty
pity.
close.
Okay, but that's one dimension.
So I
That's
think
one trait.
Being bad to me is somebody who is always, wants to harm people, wants to always have the advantage without the effort. A freebie, like a freeloader. When everything has to be easy. That to me is somebody who's bad.
So how about someone who in business likes to get ahead by destroying the people in front of them?
Destroying. What do you mean? Destroying the competition?
Yes.
Well, that's the whole game.
No, it's not. See, I disagree with you wholeheartedly.
but elaborate.
Because I've seen many people, especially Silicon Valley type of individuals, who are a bunch of type A's that want to get ahead. But there are some that do it collaboratively, that want success for everyone, that want to move ahead by being successful as a team. And there's other people who want to destroy everyone in that team so that they look good. So even though it's the same team, it's the same company, it's the same.
That's a different example. Yeah, we were talking about destroying competition.
Well, competition, personal competition, so that you can rise and
Well-
get that.
And what do you mean by destruction? I mean,
Yeah.
outmaneuvering is not to destroy something.
Making others look bad so that you can look. Good.
Well, if you
To me, I find that despicable behavior of
you-
human beings in business.
if it's dishonest, yes. But if it's honest, I mean, if that
No. Like I said, they seek to manufacture ways
Oh,
of
okay.
making others look
That-
bad.
that is bad,
They go around and
If you-
badmouth people.
For me, the line is if you malign people, you've crossed the line.
Well, then that's all of Silicon Valley.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay,
it's,
so
it's terrible.
I'm right about
But what,
capitalism.
but what is at the root of it?
yeah.
It's the desire to succeed more than anything.
But what
anymore.
what is success?
Well, get that promotion, make more money, be more important. Become the general manager of the division versus not.
So so all those things are a form of power
yes,
or financial
yes, both.
wealth.
Yes, both.
That's bad.
Well,
No, I think what he's saying is the way in
way-
which some people go about achieving that.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
distasteful for me.
Yeah, if
I don't
it's-
like it.
if
The
it's-
goal in itself is not necessarily bad.
Yeah,
The means through which you achieve the goal may be.
Okay,
I think is what I'm hearing.
right. So
that's exactly it.
Don't
and,
we?
and for me, I find that morally reprehensible. I find that the personal integrity of these people is sorely lacking because they're
Okay, so
not beyond.
I just want to pause for a moment because you raised a number of terms
Yep.
that I think ultimately get us to the heart of what I'm trying to get to in this conversation.
Wow. Okay.
So,
I didn't realize I was getting there.
integrity.
Neither did I.
Integrity.
Yes.
Do we agree that having integrity is good and lacking integrity is bad?
Yes.
Agree. Yes.
Can we say the same about morality?
100%.
100%.
Yes.
Yeah. Integrity and morality
Yeah.
go hand in hand to make
Pillars.
a good person versus a piece of shit, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, can we say the same thing about respect?
I think
If
that's part
it's
of morality.
If it's deserved,
It's part of morality. I
I
agree
think
with
it's-
Noran.
I think that's an envelope that fits under morality to have
good.
to be
But yes,
respectful of other people.
but yes.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to respect
Absolutely.
somebody just because they're in a position like a priest or whatever.
No, that's
If
not.
he deserves it, yeah.
No, just decent human respect, like respect for another human being before they open their mouth to
Yeah.
give to
Not to judge.
not to judge and you
Okay.
know, whatever.
But after they open their mouth,
Yeah, then you can judge the shit out of them. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, I'm good with that.
Not just by what they say, but what they do as well.
Well, of course.
So respect, integrity, morality.
Yeah.
100%.
Okay.
Okay.
Are there other attributes that come to mind?
Well, is the E word going to be?
Is empathy a part of
honesty can be packaged with integrity.
Integrity and honesty
but
go hand in hand.
Integrity really in its pure definition is more doing what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
Whereas honesty is just, not lying, be truthful and transparent
Yeah.
about things, about information.
Yep.
Are there others that come to mind?
Well,
Empathy for me.
Yeah, you go.
I emphasize empathy.
I don't. I think empathy. I don't like empathy because,
You can't have. How can you have respect
Okay.
without empathy?
So these
because it can be abused. Empathy is always abused.
Anything can be abused. Respect can be abused.
no.
as well.
So I'm going to make a distinction. We raised a couple of attributes or traits,
Yeah.
which can be defined in black or white terms. In other words, it's not degree. If you have it, it's good. If you don't, if you lack it, it's bad.
And we all
Right?
agreed.
Yeah.
Now there are a whole bunch of others
Yeah.
That are gray zone.
that are gray zone.
Perfect.
So degrees of
Yep. So empathy is one of them.
empathy would be one of them. Ego is another.
I think ego can be good.
No, ego is self-image, of course.
Yeah.
So, but it can
Exactly.
quickly get to a point where you have
Narcissistic,
such
yeah.
exactly narcissism is not good.
It's not good.
Okay.
Okay, so then we're looking at degrees.
Correct.
Aggression, in what form? Aggression can be very positive.
Yep.
Because aggression is determination.
And standing up for
Yeah,
yourself.
but
Right?
yeah,
But then aggression can also be something violent.
Yeah, losing your mind.
I prefer the word determination.
So do I.
Yeah.
But it's determination is a form of
Can be.
you're aggressively pursuing something that
To me,
leads to a positive outcome.
because aggression, I always associate it to physical aggression for some reason. I don't associate that to psychological or whatever.
But it's a behavior.
Yeah.
So you can aggressively pursue a goal.
Yeah, which is fine.
It doesn't mean that you're doing it in a way that's detrimental to the well-being of others. It just means you're aggressively
You can be
doggedly and so on
Yeah.
pursuing goal.
You can be morally just and have integrity while being aggressive in that goal.
Sure.
Yeah. So these things aren't mutually exclusive.
Yeah, but
Agreed.
those three things are determination when you put it together. It's like,
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. So.
Yeah, but there are synonyms, right? So I'm saying
Yeah.
there are terms where it's black and white,
Yep.
good or bad. Others, degree.
Correct. Yeah.
And if you exceed a certain point,
yeah,
which is, I would think, subjective,
Yeah.
then people will say you're either good or bad.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone has a different
Okay.
degree of what they hold higher in terms of their view of goodness and badness. For example, Aki, for you, empathy is important, whereas for me, it's much less important. Mind you, in a partner, if I'm looking at a potential partner, yeah, I'd like that person to have some empathy. Doesn't mean that they have to be a
Pushover.
or a social worker or a nurse or someone with inherently a lot of empathy. But I wouldn't consider that a negative for sure. I would consider that a positive, even though I don't have much of it myself. I still consider that a virtuous behavior in someone in front of me. So I kind of agree with you on that front, although I wouldn't consider myself bad for not having it, if I can say so.
No, that's fair.
No, because when you have a moral compass, there's a balancing here in what you're talking about. So your moral compass certainly adds significant balance to what you perceive as being a lack of empathy.
Good point.
But you have integrity and moral compass.
Yeah, good point. Okay, I didn't think of it that way, but you're right. Yeah.
So
yeah.
what? Another question for you.
Thank
guys.
you, by the way. Cheers.
What importance do you attach to circumstantial or situational behaviors in determining whether they're good or bad?
That's a beautiful way to judge someone, is to see their reaction to something. So
You mean in the face of a specific situation?
yeah,
Well,
exactly.
if I ask you point blank,
Yeah,
is a violent person good or bad?
bad.
Okay.
Violence is
Let
bad.
me ask you a question. If someone broke into your home
And I kill him.
and physically aggressed your wife and daughters
Yeah.
to the point that it made your blood boil,
Yeah.
and you saw an opportunity
Yeah.
to punish that individual severely through a violent act,
Yeah.
are you justified in your actions?
Yes.
Yes.
Was that good or bad?
That's good. And I'm not calling 911.
No, it's bad, but it's necessary.
I'm calling 811.
No, it's not necessary. It's justified.
Fine. Justified.
not
Bad,
necessary.
In his
justified.
mind, it's necessary.
Sometimes bad is justified.
So
No.
Extreme,
now we're
extreme-
getting to see the real Aki.
So-
in extreme
come on.
situations.
Guys,
That's
hold
normal.
on. Bear with me. Bear with me.
Okay.
So, in order to perform that violent act against an aggressor, which in your mind is totally justified and reasonable, you had to have a capacity for violence
Yeah.
that's inherent within you.
Sure.
Because some people in those situations would just freeze or do nothing.
It's like a toggle switch.
Okay.
You know?
So that means that trait is within you. Something triggered it.
Yes.
You know,
But at the root, that's not a positive trait or attribute.
No.
No, actually,
well, it
it
is
is.
a positive.
No, it's not.
It can be.
Yeah.
No,
It
we
is.
talk.
Self-preservation.
In this case, that's
okay.
it.
So for self-preservation needs,
Yeah.
you have to be able to defend yourself.
So that
If
wasn't
you're aggressed.
self-preservation as much as it was revenge.
Yeah, but that's fine. I mean, if it's a daughter,
No, it's fine. It's fine because you say so.
Correct.
Right? These are attributes that exist in other species on the planet we share.
Yeah.
Yeah. Animalistic. tendencies.
Animalistic tendencies.
Yeah, that's human. The humanity is that way. I mean, we're not that. Even though we have the ability to reason and talk and do all this stuff, we're still animals.
So I come back to context or situation. How much does it matter in determining whether a behavior or an apparent trait is good or bad?
Well, it's very important.
Yeah, but Pat, the example you gave is an extreme example.
Of course.
So what you're saying, and I agree with you, is that human beings can be prompted to violence, even those who are not necessarily violent by nature, because of a situation, to save a child, to do whatever, to save a spouse, to save a parent. They will do something that they would not normally ever do. I think that's an extreme situation, and that just goes to prove that humanity will do what's required to survive.
I am not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that to me it's interesting.
But that person isn't bad. That's the point.
I didn't say a person is good or bad at this stage. I'm looking at certain character traits and or behaviors.
Which can be good versus
And in certain
usually bad.
cases, I would say universally, we as civilized human beings would say that's good and that's bad. There are others, however, which we cannot define or we are challenged to define as good or bad unless someone provides context.
Yeah.
Good
Because
point.
if I were to ask you
Yep.
whether murdering another human being demonstrates good or bad behavior, I think that in the absence of context, we would universally say it's
hope
bad.
so.
Yeah, 99.999% of the time, it's absolutely
Oh,
bad.
yes.
Now, if I were to tell you that murder was not committed for the sake of pleasure, it was committed in the act of self-defense.
Yeah, exactly.
I've provided context.
Correct.
Still good.
Or a person was about to take the life of a loved one, a child, a spouse,
Or
whatever.
even an innocent person, I mean, you don't.
That's it.
Yeah, that's good. Still good.
See, I'd be less on the innocent person one.
No, but let's
That's
say-
my lack of empathy.
No, you see somebody attacking, somebody walking on the street.
Oh, yeah,
you
exactly.
intervene. I mean,
Okay.
Most people
So-
don't.
Yeah,
No.
most people won't.
No, I
exactly.
know. Anyway, I think that's good. But in another situation, if you just, like let's say in business, there's a position that becomes available. It's a promotion for you. It could be a promotion for a couple of other colleagues. If you start telling lies about those other colleagues in order to give yourself an advantage, that's bad.
Yep.
But if you do work harder and do something special to highlight your position, your candidature, then that's good.
Yeah.
That's it.
I just think, so there's a part of me, I think like most people who think of human beings as being the civilized ones on this planet. And then every day we have examples
Yeah.
of why that isn't necessarily true.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I often find myself thinking, whether we're good or bad, and if it is the nurturing or the lessons we are taught that cause us to act in a civilized way, and in the absence of those lessons, we would be more apt to act in the way that animals do.
Well,
So you're saying moms are the reason why we're actually good people.
it's not just lessons; it's your life experiences.
But
You know,
your life
were-
experiences, are part of the nurturing
if
process.
you were abused when you were a little boy, and
Chances are you will repeat the behavior.
well, repeat or seek revenge or whatever.
Yeah,
I mean,
well-
it's that toggle switch. It just toggles. To
Yeah,
the
and the point I come back to repeatedly is that means that switch, that capacity has to exist within you in
Yes.
order for something
It has to exist.
to trigger.
Yeah,
it.
I think.
How did we survive this
yeah,
long?
I
Right?
think we're like an electrical panel. All the switches are there. All the breakers are there. It's just what triggers it off. A situation.
And some people get triggered a lot quicker than others.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. There's an overload, and
Look, I think that genetics plays a major role here. A little bit to your point earlier, I think the DNA is a very legitimate answer to this, and I think also that there are people that are predisposed. I think people who are born from the crib who are predisposed to evil and bad things
Or violence.
or violence.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, there's a nature
You're
versus
saying-
nurture
You're
thing,
saying
right?
to a greater degree than the average person.
Correct. So I'll give you an example.
Because what we were just saying a moment ago is that everyone has that switch. Or
Everybody has
virtually
that switch.
everyone has that.
Everyone has that switch, but it's the degree that I'm bringing up. So if in the case of a violent, you're defending, I don't know, somebody has grabbed your partner's purse, your spouse's purse, right? A robbery has been committed. You chase after them to get it back. So I think the normal acceptable conduct would be for you to stop that person, recover the purse. But if you go beyond that and you murder them,
Murder for yeah, okay.
right?
That's
I mean, it's an extreme example, but
you should
that's
just break a few bones. That's okay.
well, even break a few bones. I mean, get the purse.
No, but so okay.
Deal with the
Dislocated
situation.
shoulder.
So
Put a
let's-
stop to the situation.
Let's take a step back. So here's an interesting exercise because I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, all you're doing is sharing what you believe to be acceptable behavior
Yes.
based on your notion of what our civilized society should look like. But these are all human constructs, right? We have laws that essentially have been laid out in order to tell us what is acceptable, legally acceptable or unacceptable.
Yeah.
I hope so.
But in the absence of those human constructs, how do you think human beings would behave?
Like animals. 100% like
Okay,
animals.
so then, okay.
100% like animals. It's because of fear of consequence that you don't kill the person that just robbed a purse. You'll maybe slap them around a little bit if you can.
But it's more than the fear of consequence. I don't disagree that for many people it's fear of consequence.
There's definitely a factor
But
in there,
well, I think there's a more important factor, which is a philosophical one.
which is
Well, I think that over time, human beings who have this capacity to think have pondered whether we as a species would be better off in a society that's harmonious, peaceful, collaborative, cooperative versus win at all costs. Right? And I think that the norms we've established in our societies, and there are differences in different regions of the world for reasons of culture and so on, but fundamentally, I think that what those different laws or rules reflect is different attitudes and beliefs towards the role of human beings, be they male, female, in society.
okay. And what do you think about the current state of politics and the reflection that has on what people view to be the right thing to do?
So one of the reasons I raised the topic for discussion today is because while I'm observing the state of politics and other facets of human life in the world today, it brings me to question whether we are inherently good or bad.
I see.
Because when I see
you had ulterior
when I
motives.
see individuals who either are self-appointed or in other cases, elected through a democratic process to positions of authority and power, we are being led today by individuals that I struggle to call inherently good.
I agree.
I see the vast majority of them, at least the ones that are in the most prominent and powerful positions of leadership, as being inherently bad.
And you think,
And I come back to the black and white issues, morality, integrity, and so on.
Yeah.
but Pat, do you think those individuals were born bad, or they developed to be bad?
I think that they were probably born the way most human beings are born,
Okay.
and then through a process of nurturing and self-direction, came to the realization that in order to realize their personal goals and ambitions, they had to behave a certain way, and that behavior would be perceived by, I would think, the majority of the population as bad as opposed to good.
Okay.
Except they still got elected.
Because you don't need, and even in a democratic process,
Yeah, you don't
even
majority.
need half the population to be in your favor.
That is so true.
You just need half the people who are going out to vote to be in your favor, or the majority of the people who are going out to vote to be in your favor.
Exactly.
I think that
But not in the Canadian system.
It's even worse.
so.
Let's not go there, guys.
Yeah, that's even worse.
I think history is the story of human beings, too many human beings having a propensity for violence and for doing bad things. And history is a story of putting checks into that. And the reason why we are, and the reason why we are where we are now in terms of, at least with our laws and our the pillars of civilization, it's to restrain the significant proportion of humanity that is prone to
Bad
be
behavior.
destructive.
Bad behavior.
Yeah.
So then are you saying
We're bad
That we're bad?
inherently.
Yeah.
That's what you're
Inherently?
saying.
I said too many of us, not all
no,
of us.
but okay, not all, not 100%.
But
Do
you're
you
right.
think most people are good or bad? You started off the conversation
I don't
or
know.
piggybacked on Dominic's comments by saying good. Now you're saying things
Yeah.
that reflect, the
No.
majority of the population.
I said
historically, he's correct.
Yeah, but historically,
Right? Like
I'm
the
talking-
Crusades were not
So what's
inherently good.
So it's changed.
yeah,
The laws. So I think what's changed.
Civilization.
But if the laws are only in place,
Yeah, but so let me finish the thought, right? So I agree with Aki in the sense that these laws have been put in place more recently after the Second World War. I think people got fed up of the destructive powers of people like the Nazis and Hitler at the time, and others who had the desire and thirst for power. So I think it took an atrocity bad enough globally for people to say, you know what, enough of this shit. Let's put some laws in place. Let's have the United Nations. Let's put laws in place that are going to prevent this type of bad behavior, because inherently people who rise to prominence are people who display bad behaviors because they're not necessarily morally strong. They don't necessarily have the integrity required, but they have the aggressivity and the desire and the push to get to that level, which isn't necessarily good for humanity.
But even beyond the 20th century, I'm talking about like a wider lens. If you look at history,
No,
per
but-
se, if you look at history per se, all I'm saying.
But you're ruining it now.
No. Let me just finish. If you look at history per se, I mean, you can go back, to this notion of God kings, unaccountable God kings, tyrants, that could massacre and wage war as they pleased.
Yeah, that's most of our history
Right?
as humans.
That's right. So that's where we started, and the evolution, if you want to use that word.
We didn't evolve. I don't
Maybe we
think
didn't.
so.
As human nature, but we've evolved in terms of at least making an effort, to restrain and reduce that. That's been the story of history.
No, it hasn't been the story of history. I think what you just outlined defines the period post World War II to 2010-ish. Let's call it early 21st century.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, history is the same. And now we're seeing some of the most powerful leaders in the world and in political positions who are reverting back to the mean.
Okay, guys, you cannot dismiss going back, beyond the 20th century, you cannot dismiss, the Renaissance. You cannot dismiss science. You cannot dismiss.
What does science have to do with anything?
These were developments that the humanity pursued that made us better.
Ottoman Empire, Roman Empire, fast forward, French
Crusades.
Empire, British Empire, American Empire,
right, but at each point,
Chinese Empire.
But at each point, there was pushback. There was a level of restraint. There was new rules that were put in place
until a leader comes along who says, "I'm not respecting the rules."
Yeah,
right.
But historically, you can't look at that.
Even in America today, you have a leader, the most powerful position in the world, who is saying, "Forget the rules that the UN and others have tried putting in place. I'm not even going to respect the rules
of my own constitution,
and my Supreme Court and my Congress." And
so imagine the damage. Imagine what this leader, could have committed if this was in the in previous centuries, like the 18th or 19th century.
It depends what he was born
from
into.
Doing it today.
Sorry, if he wasn't born
There's
into
more checks and balances.
Where are the checks and balances? They're being ignored.
Well,
if he wasn't born into royalty, he wouldn't have had the chance. He would have been killed earlier on. So listen. Let's stop going back hundreds of years.
Yeah,
okay.
But history is not a good judge.
All I'm saying is that
humanity
that's the
is
trend
a
line
bunch
that
of
I'm
animals.
talking about. I see the trend line.
No, you have individuals who weren't born into royalty and who led rebellions and amassed tremendous power and authority.
Right. Yeah, and the church being one of them. Yes,
well, and others. And others.
Yeah, but Pat, all I'm saying is that this is in our past.
It's in the present.
I'm saying
Putin is in the present.
I know, but historically, all of this stuff was in the past. And all I'm trying to say, and I kind of agree with you in the sense that humanity, for most of our history, has been bad. The bad has risen to the fore, has risen to the top. It's just in the past, whatever, like you said, from the 1948 or 47 to 2010, we've become enlightened in the sense that there were laws passed. People said, enough of this shit. We don't want, millions of people murdered for nothing. We don't want atom bombs dropped on innocent people. All of this stuff happened just in the past, whatever.
Because when you look at history, you have to be careful because the norms were different.
But that's what I'm saying.
2, 3, 4, 500 years ago, crusades, going out and killing people. That's
in the name of God.
In the name of God.
That's the way things were done.
Absolutely.
What are you guys talking about? It's being done today.
Yeah, I know.
It's being done today.
But now we have norms. We have
what norms? It doesn't matter if you have norms if they're not being respected.
It's not to the same degree is the point.
Yeah.
What's holding it from being to the same degree?
Well,
the laws.
There are laws.
No, not the laws.
And some consequences.
Not the laws.
And there is a level of morality.
It's just that we are at a point in the post-World War II era where there are still certain countries who believe in the principles that were established post-World War II to create a better world, a more peaceful world.
Yeah, good.
But what we've seen is that there are cracks in the system.
Yes.
And there are countries that don't behave that way.
And now we're seeing a growing number of countries, including the most powerful economically and militarily, the most powerful countries in the world who are no longer respecting those norms. Yeah. So where are we headed?
Destruction.
And then I come back to the original question. Does that reflect, as hard as it is for us to make, are we inherently good or bad?
I still think we are inherently good.
I think
our leadership, what it takes to become a leader may not be the things that will attract you in a spouse. Is the point that I'll make. So I think the leadership, to your point, Pat, are a bunch of narcissistic, power-hungry, aggressive, strong-willed human beings that have risen to the top in terms of leadership positions of these countries. That doesn't necessarily reflect on what I would consider to be a good person that I want to be with as a spouse, for example.
Fair enough. But I would argue that the fact that we have laws and rules and regulations in place
and new social standards
is because, again, philosophically, at some point in time, we determined that we had to guard ourselves
from ourselves
against or from ourselves. Because we have instincts which, if left unchecked, are likely to lead to a large enough number of people behaving poorly, badly, violently, aggressively in a way that would be detrimental to the well-being of society at large.
And we put in place systems. We put in place systems throughout our history. We put in place systems to minimize that. But the systems are not ironclad. And right now, again, to your point, they are being threatened.
Well, look at all of the bad behaviors we're seeing on social media now, you know, the Karens of this world and so on, from people who believe they are entitled, who don't accept that something didn't go their way.
Yeah.
And again, this is against the typical social norm of people, you know, being rude to other people, passing each other in line. There's just bad behavior, bad social behavior amongst people. And somehow it's because, well, I'm entitled. It's all about me. The narcissistic nature of people are coming out. So somehow there's some sort of, I don't know, mixing of the pot.
Okay, but part of the human construct has been, regardless of language or dialect, to come up with words that are generally have negative connotations associated with them as a means of deterring certain behaviors.
Right.
Which, for philosophical reasons, we don't want to be the norm.
Yeah.
But left to ourselves, if we didn't, so when I say narcissism, you react negatively. Oh, a narcissist is a bad thing.
Yeah, it's like picking your nose in public versus in private.
Yeah, but what if it's just a thing? What if it's just a thing?
Well, but what I just said is exactly that. It's how you behave in public versus in private, right? In private, you can be an asshole. In public, you could say, "Oh, you know, maybe I better show the nicer part of me."
You can be an asshole, but we have put social norms and rules and regulations in place to deter behaviors.
Right.
My point is, if we're trying to deter something, it's because we don't like the potential consequences of what may naturally occur.
So I agree with you. I see where you're going. Your thesis is people are essentially bad, and we're trying to be good.
I'm not. No,
that's I think what you're saying.
It's a bit of a trick question.
I think,
and the reason I say it's a trick question is because the answer is: are we good or bad? And to me, the answer is yes. We are what we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason we think of it in good or bad terms is because we have chosen as human beings to associate the words good or bad with certain traits or behaviors or attributes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's part of the human construct.
I like the psychology of what you're saying because that's
the only way of
pretty
doing
deep.
it.
I like that.
That's the only way of doing it.
I believe that in terms of our makeup,
Yeah.
and they're the outliers. So I'm coming back to your infamous bell curve.
The bell curve.
There are the people who are just inherently so good, they comprise 10% or less of the population.
You're welcome.
Okay.
He's right.
So while he's 25% of this group, he only represents less than 10% of the population.
Is that what, 1 or 2 sigma? I think it's only 1 sigma is 95%?
No.
I forget, it's 70%. 1 sigma is 70, 2 is 95, I think.
You're going to break my train of thought.
Sorry.
The other
love it when you talk Greek.
The other 10%, right, probably has a propensity for what we would consider to be bad behavior.
You're welcome.
So a subset of that 10%, a much smaller percentage, are the psychopaths and sociopaths.
You're welcome.
Again, well represented, although collectively representing 50% of the Romeo population, less than 1% of the overall population. And then you have the whole middle ground.
Yeah.
And for me, the middle ground is both good and bad, again, as we define good and bad. Mm-hmm. And the behaviors that we will see exhibited are going to be a function of the situations or circumstances people find themselves in.
It depends, basically. Depends on the situation. I agree. I think that was a very well...
Yep.
Nice way to put it.
Nice paradigm.
Let me put a situation out there. Let's say we had no laws against shoplifting. Mm-hmm. Would most people,
San Francisco.
Would most people today go into stores and just shoplift?
Not most, but a lot.
So on day one, no. Over time, yes.
Yeah, because people would say, well, everyone else is doing it, so I'm going to do it. That's the...
And anytime you change a situation from its current state to a new state, the immediate impact doesn't reflect what the longer term impact will be.
The point I want to make is, I think a lot of the laws is to control the minority of people, the one respect them. They weren't,
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
think so.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the law.
Well, I would say most laws.
No, like so speeding.
Well, I'm not a good example.
Not a good. Oh, why? It's a law,
Yeah, no.
Everybody speeds.
right? Pool enclosure laws.
That's a pet peeve of someone on this table.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, I think you have something to say about.
I think it is.
Using the bus lanes.
No, but think about it. Think about it.
Yeah, I know.
And I say it tongue in cheek, but truthfully, we've reached a point in certain areas of Western civilization where we have elected officials who are actually telling parents that the laws we are enacting are because we don't trust your parenting.
Yeah.
So we will make decisions for you.
Yeah.
I like Dominic.
Yeah, but then
I like
you-
Dominic's take on pools versus women.
We won't go there.
I think we should.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why is a pool like a woman?
Oh, come on. I'm already in the doghouse.
Okay. All right. I won't go there.
I think that moves them from the doghouse into the pigsty.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't have a pool.
Aki?
Well, the example you gave. Okay. We're talking about good and bad. So you have politicians who are, they're dim-witted and they put in place wrong policies. So you have democracy and people can push back and there's people have recourse. I'm not sure if that's really like a case you're making for good or bad.
Yeah, but recourse is
No,
years.
that wasn't a
It
case of
takes
good or
years.
bad. That's a reaction to
Okay.
the elected officials enacting laws
Right. Okay.
that are aimed at the
Well,
minority
in democracy,
of the
there's going to
population.
be in democracy. There's going to be some mistakes. There's going to be some acrimony. That's part of the democratic process.
Okay. I can.
As a parallel,
Yeah.
can we say, are you born a racist? Or is it
That is an interesting
something
point.
that you developed?
I think it's
So-
learned.
Because that would be the same thing.
I think it's learned.
Yeah.
100%.
Nurtured.
I don't.
You don't think
You don't
racism
think-
is
you
No,
learned?
and
Why?
I think I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm first going to share with you my definition of racism,
Okay.
and perhaps that'll help explain why I think that.
Okay.
I think that racism is looking negatively upon individuals who are different than you are. So different in terms of your physical appearance, different in terms of your belief system, your values, and so on. And if people don't share the same values as we do, or don't share a similar appearance to ours, we have a tendency, I believe by nature, to be defensive and to look negatively upon those.
How about
Now,
nationalism? Is that part of that?
well, so I think then it becomes, there's a whole element of racism that then taps into that inherent nature of ours and builds upon it in a very negative way.
So patriotism
Through-
and nationalism can be racism.
At the extreme, of course it can be.
Okay, that's what I think as
Of
well.
course.
So that's why I kind of support
course.
what you're saying.
Absolutely.
I do support what you're saying, actually. Yeah.
But something.
That's
You're
interesting.
So you think you're born a racist?
No, I think.
So when you
So
expand
racist is a human construct.
So when you expand the definition of racist to what he just said, including nationalism and patriotism, and dislike
it doesn't
of others,
have to be nationalism
I
or
know
patriotism.
it doesn't have to be.
So
But I'm just
actually,
saying
he's a
when-
racist.
Why am I racist?
I think
Because you're
we're
a
all.
patriot.
I think we're all racists in
Yeah.
that sense.
I'm a patriot.
To your point, because in the sense that, hey, do you think are you pro Greek? Are you pro Greece?
I'm pro my culture.
Exactly.
Yes,
Are
of
you
course.
pro your culture?
Of course.
Okay.
My
if you
maternal
saw
culture. Yes.
your maternal, if you saw a culture where women are discounted and are beaten or are treated badly,
course.
what do you think of that culture?
I would condemn it.
Okay, so you're a racist. With his definition,
So that doesn't work.
it does work.
Why doesn't it work?
It does work 100%. So
I'm
I
not-
agree with what you're saying, because your definition
No.
of racism has been broadened.
Why did white people enslave black people and not white people?
They did enslave
did.
white
Why-
people
why
as
did
well.
enslave white-
No,
people
it's
too.
like we're talking like degree. There weren't many white people enslaved in the U.S. versus people brought in by the boatloads from the shores of Africa. Come on, let's be real here.
I'm talking before then, but anyway, never mind.
Because I'm not.
I'm talking about Moses in those days.
The example that you gave,
That's what I was thinking.
So hold on. Why do we still to this day deal with anti-Semitism? Why? Because people have different belief systems.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Still.
Why do you shit on other cultures?
But this is
why do we say that behavior is bad, that belief system is bad, and mine is right?
Right.
Exactly.
Because it's different from yours.
Exactly. So that
but
so that means we're all racist. Is what your point is.
Yeah, but violence and beating up on women is not. There's no gray zone in that.
Yes, there is. You said it earlier. Yes, you did.
No, there isn't.
Okay, somebody breaks into your house, right? And aggresses and harms your wife and daughter.
Yes.
You're not going to inflict harm on that person.
Of course I'm going to inflict harm on that person.
Then you just answered the question.
And you're going to enjoy inflicting harm.
But that doesn't make me a racist. I don't care, what the identity of that person is. The same thing. I'm not condemning.
You just finished saying that someone who is violent and inflicts harm upon
others. It has
others.
nothing to do with their identity. It has to do with their actions as a person.
It's a belief system.
No.
Yes, it's a belief system.
You're saying my inclination to defend my loved ones, defend my family, and to fight against violence.
Okay, Aki, I'll give you a different example, just to make it a little bit easier. I'll give you a different example. If there's a culture that allows 11-year-old girls to marry 35-year-old men, do you agree with that?
I do not agree, but I do not condemn.
Have to agree
I don't
with
condemn the culture. I condemn the actions.
Okay. So
that's why the racist doesn't distinguish. The racist is just blanket condemnation of the culture, the identity, everything from A to Z.
So you think the culture is fine if the culture is okay?
I don't
with that?
think it's a culture, but I will criticize any culture. I will criticize it if it resorts to violence, if it oppresses.
Okay,
you will criticize it because it is so opposed to your belief system.
That's what exactly
that you're condemning it.
So if you see someone from
violence.
So from this, consider there's a country called X-Land.
Mm-hmm.
In X-Land, they let 11-year-old girls marry 35-year-old men and whatever,
or 75-year-old men,
or whatever. Right? As an example, you see you see someone walking from X-Land in front of the street. What would be your inclination to this person? Would you be open and friendly and respectful to this person, or somehow inside you'll be so disgusted by the idea of what they allow in X-Land that you will just necessarily not like this person even before you've met them?
No, exactly. I will not. That will not be my first reaction. Will not be what you just described.
Well, you are the exemption.
My first reaction is to always be able to have a dialogue with another human being. That's my first reaction.
Aki, you've learned certain things in life, and the way your brain is constructed has caused you to relate to certain of the learnings in a favorable way and others in an unfavorable way.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Absolutely.
So I'll give you an example. Have people historically been apt to be violent towards one another?
Absolutely.
Okay. Where along the way did we say that's acceptable or unacceptable? At some point in history,
right,
certain societies determined that we were going to construct a value system whereby that type of behavior would be frowned upon, or we saw it evolve to the point where not only is it frowned upon, it becomes illegal. So a law, a human construct put in place over time, starting with an idea that certain behaviors are not the type of behaviors we want to see in our society.
Protecting the weak.
And while that occurred across most of Western civilization over centuries and millennia, we have, over the course of the same period of time, certain cultures in the world today that still deem those behaviors to be perfectly acceptable.
Correct.
That's it.
Whether it's beating a spouse or punishing someone who steals by cutting off their hand or arm, or by punishing someone who looks at something inappropriately by taking out an eye, those are cultural differences. And if we are of the opinion that they are wrong and we are right, then we are passing judgment based on our belief system, and we're reacting negatively simply because their beliefs do not align to ours.
Which is a form of racism, to your
point. And when we take it to an extreme...
But we don't take it to the extreme. That's a huge step.
Why is it a huge step? Any step is a step.
No, because
Aki, you're not the same as everyone else. You're very empathetic, and you have the ability... I'm sorry, but you have the ability to have that dialogue and to separate the person from your feelings about that culture, for example.
Correct.
That's fantastic. But I would say 90, 95%, maybe more of human beings are not built like you.
Well, but
and they will have.
I want to emphasize your point. I'm going to emphasize your point because Aki told us that he's not a violent person. That he would
Yes, he is.
He would commit a violent act towards someone who would be aggressive and violent towards his beloved family members.
But that's an acceptable norm.
No, it's not an acceptable norm. There are people in our society who would say, Aki, you do not have the right to act violently towards these people.
I'm sorry. One of the cornerstones of the law is
Aki,
self-defense is justified.
You are in the process.
It's a cornerstone of the law.
No, it's not.
Self-defense is
you are simply defending. You are simply defending your belief, and ultimately you would defend your actions. There are other people who would pass judgment and to say you do not have that right.
You're such an animal.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest, Pat, you lost me on that one.
Why?
It's not a belief.
It is a belief.
So you mean some people believe that self-defense is not
It's not legitimate?
it's not legitimate?
Not if it means taking another person's life.
Who the fuck is that stupid?
It's not just that stupid.
No. If your life is,
It's not a question of intelligence.
If your life is threatened,
Some people are like that. Some people are very.
Again, you think that everyone who has a different belief system from yours is stupid?
Well, it's not a.
You think Aki is liberal? There's some other further left than him.
Far further.
look, guys.
Far further left.
Look, guys.
Exactly.
Pat, self-defense is an acceptable defense.
Aki, face it, you're a
before the law.
violent individual.
That is fair. It's reasonable.
Okay, Aki.
That has
Aki,
been part of our
if someone
practice.
were to
Those
steal
people
from you,
deserve to be killed.
Yes.
would it be acceptable to cut off their hand or their arm?
No.
Why? Why?
Because it crosses a line of.
No, it crosses a line you don't want to cross.
Well, it crosses a line
in certain cultures. That's
Yes,
perfectly
right,
acceptable.
right,
Exactly.
So,
right. But
in the
most-
same way as you taking a life for a life,
How do you go from there to racism, though? This is the where you lose me.
I'm saying that in its purest form, racism begins with an inherent
Us
trait
versus
you
them.
find in human beings
No.
where we don't react positively to things or people who are different from us.
Us versus them.
in our appearance, in our beliefs, in our behaviors.
Okay, I think
I agree. When you expand,
That's what I'm saying.
it's a definitional thing. He's expanding the definition, and I agree with you.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, yes, we are programmed that way. We are programmed maybe to be suspicious of those who are different from us, but we're not programmed to take it then to hatred of those.
No?
No, I don't think so.
No?
That's where the
Okay, but-
nurturing comes in. That is we're nurtured to start thinking that way.
Okay, so in that situation, you would be inclined to not give that person as much of a chance as someone who who was raised in the Greek Isles, who has the same background as you, who has the same mentality as you, who's Christian based and whatever, versus some other culture and some other religion. All of these things will predispose you, in my opinion, to reacting a certain way to behaviors of this individual. The fact that you're predisposed to have a different reaction to a behavior is the racism that he's talking about. And that's why I agree with him.
But-
it's inside you. You don't even feel it. It's chemical.
But you're wrong.
And by the way, and it's so
Wrong.
easy to trigger.
Wrong.
Exactly.
It's so easy
This
to
is
trigger.
where the nurturing comes in. The
No,
trigger
but
part of it.
listen.
That's the nurturing.
It's so much harder to teach human beings today how to behave a certain way. Racism is so easy to trigger.
It is.
It is easy to
So
trigger.
easy.
It is easy to
Which
trigger.
tells you how inherent it is in most human
Okay,
beings.
and again, I'm making a separation. There is, of course, as human beings, again, we are programmed to have a certain attitude towards those who are different from us. Some suspicion. That's normal. It's part of our survival ability. But to take that then to saying, I hate them and I must oppress them.
That's not what I said, Aki.
But to me, that's what racism
But
is.
that's not what I said. What I said is you will be predisposed to act differently.
Yes, I'll be predisposed.
But that is racism. And the fact that you don't recognize
no, it's
that
not.
is an issue.
Hate is racism.
No.
Hate is racism.
No.
Absolutely.
No, a difference in behavior is racism.
No. So you make me laugh. You make me think of a person I
going to the
knew
extreme.
once upon a time who would tell me that I'm not racist. I have nothing against blacks. They're allowed to live.
Well, of course.
And I would say, what? What?
That shouldn't even be said. Of course. All people have a life.
Fuck.
No, but seriously.
Everybody, has a right to life.
And you know what? They say, I'm not racist.
Everybody has a right to life. Of course.
Are you listening to yourself?
Of course. Of course.
Fucking terrible.
Talk
No,
about
yeah,
a
terrible.
triggering statement.
No,
So,
but Aki,
What, man, look at what's happening in the world today.
yeah, it's all racism.
Language, appearance, skin color, nationality, religious belief,
All of it.
Yep.
borders. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, everything is triggering. And
You're either like us.
you don't have to hate someone for you to be racist towards them. It's just a difference of the way you would behave than to another person. That in itself is racism. The fact that there's a different behavior, any difference in behavior between two different people is a form of racism.
Okay, I'm at a restaurant.
It has to be.
I'm at a restaurant, and some people are eating with their fingers in their hands. And yes, I will notice that, and it will maybe shock me, or I will ask some questions about that. But I don't hate that person. I'm not inclined.
It's not about hate. It's the
It
way
is
you would
about hate. Racism is about hate. It's the heart of racism is hatred. Blind
ask-
hatred.
No,
that
no,
is racism.
No, so
No,
your
no.
definition is wrong.
No,
Well, I
no.
That's all I'm
I disagree.
I agree.
And you have to look at what the origins of the sentiment are. Because in the example you give, when you watch those people eating with their hands and fingers and shoving food down their mouths,
in disgust.
right? What is the thought that goes through your mind? Is that
Fucking
acceptable
animals.
behavior?
But that doesn't make me a racist.
No, I'm asking you, is that
does.
acceptable or unacceptable behavior?
My behavior, I'm not behaving. These are my
no.
inner thoughts, my
Their
perceptions.
behavior.
Their
is
behavior.
it acceptable or unacceptable?
Unacceptable.
Unacceptable. My
Well,
reaction,
based on whose beliefs?
on who I am, but that doesn't stop there. This is what
You're a racist and you
You're
don't even know it.
absolutely, you're taking such a
He's a racist.
scalpel to this.
He's a racist because he believes that people should use utensils.
It's a matter.
It's the reaction it's talking about. But my
Racism
And now we're talking degrees, right? So I don't hate the person, but I believe,
don't hate the person.
that these people
Are heathens.
are inferior
I
to me.
know.
In what way?
No.
In what way?
I don't hate them, but I don't like them.
No, I don't like the way. I don't like their.
So you're making my point. It's a question of
I
degree.
don't like their table manners. I don't like their table manners. I'm not going to extrapolate from that. I don't like them. I'm disgusted by them. I'm disgusted by their culture. I'm disgusted by everything they represent. I'm not. No, that's really a tremendous leap.
No,
For you,
degree.
it's degree, exactly. You're more of a black and white. Racism is hate, whereas what we're saying is that it's if you change the behavior towards that person in any way versus another person, that is racism. The degree is much smaller. I will give you that. But there is racism. If you turn your nose up and you don't want to talk to these people because, oh my God, they disgust you because they ate with their hands, that's a form of racism.
Okay,
it is.
They're white people doing this.
It doesn't matter.
They're Greeks. They're Greeks. They're
Well,
Greeks
why
like
did you
me.
think they were not white to begin
They're
with?
Greeks.
You're fucking
They're-
racist.
They're Greeks. I would
There
react,
you go.
No,
Point made. Thank
no,
you very
because
much.
my reaction and my
See?
thoughts.
Now you understand.
My reaction and
100%.
my reaction and my thoughts would be identical. I don't care, what color they are. I don't care what language they speak.
So you brought color into it.
My reaction would be absolutely the same. That's why it negates,
Diane, put him
it
back in the
negates your
doghouse.
theory. It negates your theory. Because it doesn't matter what they look
No,
like.
actually,
I'm reacting to an act.
Actually, your response
No.
made his point for him.
No.
Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely.
I don't. No.
Okay, everyone's hate mail goes to
Racism is much more blatant. It's much more violent.
No.
and it's much more
No,
oppressive.
and that's why racism
That's
is so
the
dangerous.
that's the
is
extreme
because
form.
more often than not, it is so subtle
exactly.
that people don't pay close enough attention to it.
Exactly.
And then
You're
it mushrooms into this ugly
You're
thing
diminishing
that we see.
you're diminishing the significance of
Okay,
racism.
I'll give you
You
another
are.
example. I'm going to give you another example. You're in line at McDonald's. You go into line and you order your food. The person says, "Hey sir, how may I help you? What would you like?" "Thank you sir, here's your change."
Mm-hmm.
You're waiting for your food right next to you. The next person comes in behind you, doesn't look like you, looks like someone else.
Yeah.
The person that's serving him says, "Yeah, what do you want?" "Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, here's your money." Treats that person completely differently than you were just treated.
Absolutely.
What is that?
Would I jump the gun and accuse that person of being a racist?
No. What is that?
What is that?
I'm not saying you have to do anything. I'm just asking you. What was that?
I would say
what did you just witness?
A double standard.
You did not just witness racism?
No, I don't know what that person serving the person. I don't know who that
based
person
on his
is.
definition, you're not surprised by his response.
I don't know who that person is. How can I
exactly.
accuse that person of being a racist just by one moment of stupidity and bad manners?
This is the subtle racism that he's talking about.
Okay.
This is stuff that people of color have to deal with every day of their lives.
Oh, and by the way, and women have to deal with it.
And women and others.
And
This is
others.
the shit that I'm surprised that you don't see
No.
because you're very empathetic typically, but somehow you're not seeing this. And I'm kind of I'm surprised.
I'm seeing bad behavior.
Naran. He
Beyond
said
that,
it.
man, it's beyond that. This is subtle racism that people live through, and it diminishes people. This is what kills people from the inside out.
But here's-
if that person gets that, if that person gets that type of treatment, and by the way, he witnessed or she witnessed how you were treated 2 seconds before.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what. No, let me just say this.
This is terrible in society.
So he has told you in no uncertain terms that the line that has to be crossed in order for it to be racism
Is violence.
is hatred.
Is hatred.
Hatred.
Okay.
Right?
That's-
and I think that's what's dangerous in our society, because if we allow it to get to the point of hatred,
Exactly,
it's
man.
Okay. Too late.
Exactly.
Whereas in the example you're giving,
Yeah.
and it may be idealistic on my part, you have an opportunity to perhaps nip it in the bud before it evolves to the point of the hatred and violence that we see.
I would hope so, but
Right? But that's human nature.
Okay, so
guys, we're going to wrap it up.
Okay,
Yeah.
just a quick
Yeah.
point. Not just hatred, disrespect too is another line. Okay, the example that you gave me, if that person, responded, if that person responded to the poor service and took issue with it, I would absolutely support them.
okay.
That's you're missing the point.
But the point
You're missing
was,
the point.
But we can't continue just the reflex being to constantly tag people and
it's
just
not about
accuse them of the worst
it's not
possible
about accusing or
behavior.
tagging. It's not about accusing or tagging the person. It's about you understanding that person behind you has to live through something that you don't have to, and understanding what racism
Guys,
is.
it's not that complicated. And again, we come
Maybe we
back
should
to
talk about what's
we're talking
racism.
about is a
We should
trait
continue this conversation.
is a trait inherent in most human beings or not? And to what degree is it manifested before we apply a word, a term that is man-made, created, to say that's a bad behavior, right? Or a bad belief or an unhealthy belief. And what I'm saying is, at the root, we are wired, most of us, to look at others who are different than we are in a negative way.
Yeah.
And that's the root of what has grown into what we call racism.
Yeah, humans are pieces of shit.
Okay?
In general.
So let's wrap up. Final thoughts, Nuran?
Humans are pieces of shit in general.
Being Italian, I don't have to worry about racism because everybody loves us.
Well, I'm happy that we don't have to go more than 2 episodes without you reminding everyone.
that you're Italian.
Of your Italian.
So we are wired. We are wired. Yes, we are wired to be conscious and to be suspicious of what is different from us. But that does not mean that we are preconditioned to be racists.
Okay, you're making about racism. So to me, it's good or bad. And I believe that we are hardwired to exhibit behaviors that can be interpreted as either good or bad, depending on circumstances and situations. And I think that's true for probably 80% of the population. And you have the 10% at either end who are genetically predisposed to be more one way or the other.
There you go.
The bell curve card has been played.
There you go.
Thank you, Pat.
Well
Guys,
done.
enjoy the conversation.
Yes.
Thank you.
To our listeners and audience and viewers, thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
We
let us know
promise-
your comments. This is an important conversation.
We
We'd love to hear from
promise
you.
to work on Aki and to hopefully make him more tolerant of others and less racist in the future. And we look forward to seeing everyone next Wednesday.
Give
we
peace
can
a
continue the
chance.
Conversation.
Hell yeah.
Bye.